have not had an opportunity yet to see, we actually have done a slight overhaul of our logo. And so we're incredibly grateful for the innovation around that. Matt, who you'll hear from just momentarily, helped to drive that process for us. So we're incredibly excited. We want to make sure we reassure everyone that the 13 years of WorkFaith's history, it's not in vain. We are definitely going to continue the great legacy that Sandy built over the years, and the work that we've done for so many years to serve those we serve. We're going to continue to serve those we serve at the highest and most optimal level. And so we're incredibly grateful that you all continue to journey with us. We have a vision that we want to imagine, a workplace, a marketplace where work and faith connect. So I want everyone to be reminded of that as you think about our brand, as you think about we as an organization. Our intention is to empower leaders on a daily basis who go out into the marketplace and who carry the mantle of helping work and faith to connect. And so that's important to us. From a missional vantage point, our mission is to build faith and career skills for the marketplace, faith and career skills for the marketplace. That's important to us because the reality is we continue to serve what some would consider the lost and the least of cities, those who are transitioning out of prison, those who are overcoming felonies on their records, people who are coming out of human sex trafficking. That's who we have a heart for. Someone accidentally muted me. I apologize. I just had to unmute myself. So, but that's who we serve. And ultimately, we want to continue to serve that demographic. But our intention is to prepare and equip them that they may be a voice of faith and career skills, the combination of that in the workplace, in the marketplace. And so our intention is to continue to bring additional partners and employers along for the ride with us, that we may continue to be effective at bringing the gospel to the workforce and to the marketplace. And so without further ado, I want to turn it over to Matt Killian on our team. So Matt can provide some organizational updates in light of COVID-19. Many people are wondering about what we've been doing, what we've been up to, how we've been impacting the community. And so Matt, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Anthony. Like you said, my name is Matt Killian. It's my honor and privilege to work here at WorkFaith Connection. It really is. So I'm just going to jump right into it. On March 17th, we decided to begin working from home in light of COVID-19. Supporting our graduates was a top priority, and so we designed a campaign that enabled us to support graduates that may have been impacted by unemployment or reduced work hours. The intent behind the effort was to offer support around employment opportunities and community resources such as food, housing, child support, transportation, counseling, etc. The staff got off to a really, really good start, and the results were overwhelming. We placed over 3,100 calls, resulting in 800 different graduate conversations. 3,000 emails were sent in correspondence, and almost 500 unknown jobs to us were verified. In addition, we had 40 referrals made directly to core employer partners. We also hosted virtual technology training to impress upon our students the importance of platform navigation, etiquette, background environment, and of course, screen presence. Also, our dedicated placement team introduced 430 graduates to over 3,000 open positions through the National Labor Exchange. And through the course of all that, one of our partners, Stand Together, provided us with $11,000 that was then given to families that were severely struck and damaged by COVID-19. And so that was a tremendous blessing on behalf of Stand Together, and then delivered by WorkFaith to present to them. So in mid-April, we were still not doing any training. And so we decided to launch our virtual workshop and program. Expedited quality and care yielding the same or better results was kind of the goal. And so after careful evaluation, we reduced the 8-day, 42-hour traditional model of our program to a 5-day, 20-hour workshop. The development took place kind of in this order. We had to rewrite and condense the 8-day to a 5-day, then incorporated all 15 topics while maintaining the fabrics of faith that are woven into the delivery by the instructors. We had to choose the appropriate virtual platform that was conducive to easy access and had all the different features that we needed to pull off a virtual class. We had to revamp the entire intake process. We also had to develop a virtual coaching model to support the graduates after the workshop. We also had to develop a virtual volunteer orientation that oriented our current volunteers into the new virtual space that we had. And then last but not least, we had to incorporate all community partners and employers to join in the effort. I'm happy to say on May 11th, the offering was launched and has been proven to be a success so far. We've had close to 50 graduates with 12 more graduating tomorrow. In the midst of all that, we also launched a new financial class that is being offered by a group of coaches and has proven to be extremely successful and beneficial for all that are involved right now. I think we're currently in session. We have close to 20 people in that class that are all learning to manage finances and secure their future. Also, in an effort to secure a well-founded presence in the market of work and faith, we began expanding our marketing footprint. So Anthony mentioned a few things. We enhanced assets such as the company colors, the logo, social media strategy, newsletters, blog posts, and basic overall exposure of WorkFaith. One of the projects was this speaker series platform that brought you here today. And the first one was extremely successful, and I know this one will be too. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica and Anthony, and I appreciate your time.
Matt, thank you so much for that awesome update. We appreciate you and your leadership. And at this time, I'm going to introduce just a great friend of mine. Jessica and I have had the privilege, Jessica Kim, we've had the privilege of journeying together through an organization. We met through Praxis, which essentially is an accelerator for nonprofit and business entrepreneurs that, to make it simple, keep Christ at the center of their missions. And so there's some language, redemptive entrepreneurship, that Jessica and I are both very familiar with. And so we walk, both of us daily, we exemplify this redemptive leadership model based upon the training and the work we've done through Praxis. And so I can't wait for Jessica to share a little bit more about how that's playing out in her life and in the work she's doing on a daily basis. Jessica, I've known her for numerous years now. I don't even remember what year it was, but I've seen her operate, and man, we are incredibly blessed, you all. I can't wait to turn her over to you. Jessica, in fact, I was gonna just read a bio, but I decided not to steal your thunder. So what I wanna do is I wanna allow you, 5 minutes or so, just really to give us some background of who you are and, your story. I've met your family. I met Peter, your husband, and your 3 beautiful children. I mean, you guys are just awesome. So, but I'll let you share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into some comments and Q&A, and then we'll open up for more Q&A from the audience.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. And I am so inspired by all of your work at WorkFaith. So it's a true honor to be here. Anthony, you are one of the most inspiring faith-centered leaders that I know in my life. So it's just an awesome opportunity to always serve alongside you. So thank you. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. My parents were immigrants from South Korea. And, they came over here with nothing, but ended up building just a beautiful life, just from really hard work and grit. My dad was a psychiatrist, which really had a major impact on me. I mean, he was always talking about mindset and, self-confidence and emotional intelligence, and always talking about interpersonal kind of dynamics with people. And it really showed when, how we all get that question when we're growing up, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? We all get that question, even probably still today. And I remember this, and it's funny to look back, that even when I was 10 years old, I remember saying, I don't know what I want to be or what job this is, but I do know that I want to study people. Like, I just want to study people. I have always been And I continue to be just so intrigued by people, cultures, backgrounds, upbringing, situational experiences that literally shape the way we all see the world. And so luckily my dad wasn't saying, well, what kind of job is that? What he always raised me, and I'm the youngest of three, so maybe, he was just tired by that point, but he was like, just do what you love, because what you have an interest in comes from God. Pursue that. But when you learn, and you got to do it well, do it with excellence. And so that gave me the freedom to say, okay, I really want to study people. What does that mean? So in college, I majored in anthropology, and I really just dug into the study of people. But one thing led to another, and during my sophomore year, I ended up starting my first company. It was actually a very random, event if you really think back at it. But at the root of it, I was just obsessed with people and consumers and just the whole dynamic. But I walked into this pizzeria and I saw a plate of banana bread being sold. I was 19 years old, and it was saran wrapped, and it had a $1.69 sign on it. So I knew it wasn't made by a company. And so I said to the owner, I was like, who made this? I could do so much better. And he's like, yeah, all right, we'll bring it in. So I baked a banana bread. I baked for fun, but I baked a banana bread and I brought it out, and he sold out. And he's like, I never sell out of banana bread. Bring another one in. And it kept happening. After 10 loaves, I was like, wait, people need to know that I made this. And so I made signs out of construction paper and markers, and I called it Jessica's Wonders. And the slogan was, so good, it'll make you wonder. It was, I ended up selling to 13 different locations, baking all out of my dorm room. And just really, it was such a raw experience in my introduction to entrepreneurship. I entered a business plan competition my senior year and won. And then I raised $1 million. It's crazy. I was raising $1 million my senior year. I had braces. I looked like I was 13 years old. And it was just an incredible raw experience. I learned so much from it. From there, after a couple of years of doing that, my eyes were just opened up to the power of business. So I was a new Christian then. So I felt God was giving this to me because I need to bless the world. But how do I do that with baked goods? Like, do I put something in it? Like, what do I do? And so I saw this as an opportunity where we had to hire a lot of people to hand out samples, right? So the best way to sell a food item is have people taste it. And so I saw this opportunity to kind of work with, the local community organizations to create Working Wonders, which was to give job opportunities to people who may have just kind of gotten lost in the system and just needed their first job opportunity to get to their next. Learned a lot through that, made a lot of mistakes, but I saw the power of what a business could do for real change, even if it's just a baked goods business. From there, I went to business school at Northwestern just to understand what all just happened. And then I worked at Kraft Foods to kind of get a bigger corporation experience, to have the apples to apples comparison of what it's like to start a baked goods business out of your dorm room to a Fortune 500. And I was there for about 3.5 years. And that's when I first got pregnant with my daughter. And so a whole new world opened up to me when I was on maternity leave of this world of parenting. And what I soon realized was that there were a lot of companies that were trying to sell me things, right? As a new mom, it's a great target market. But what I realized is that the most important thing that we can give to our kids is our time, attention, and love. And so how do we foster that as parents? And so I started this company called Babaco, and we created products and just to all facilitate the quality time that you can spend together. So we got venture capital backing from that. We grew very quickly, and then it got acquired by Barefoot Books, which is a global children's publishing company. It's very multicultural, which I love, and I stayed on as president for a little over 2 years. And then my world stopped because my mom had pancreatic cancer and just found out that it came back. So she had pancreatic cancer for about 7.5 years, which is very unusual. And when it came back for the third time, my parents were just so burnt out and could no longer really care for themselves. So I convinced them to move from New Jersey to Boston in with me. And for the first time in my life, I was always a working mom of 3 kids. My kids were 10, 7, and 5 at that time. And I stepped back from work to be their full-time caregiver. So I was thrust into that position of just navigating all of her medical care. I was performing all the nursing duties. I was pumping her stomach several times a day. I was feeding her and bathing her and carrying her. And eventually she couldn't get treatment anymore. She entered at-home hospice, and she passed away in my home June 30th of 2017. So we're coming up on 3 years. And, you know, as part of the healing process and my deep, deep grief, I just kind of voraciously started digging into healthcare and caregiving. Something was way off. I was super frustrated that I was navigating all of this, but yet I felt so unsupported. And I realized that over 90% of the time that my mom was being cared for was happening in the home under my care. But I am not a medical professional. And so what we're creating with my next venture, which is called Ianacare, is a platform to help support and navigate, you know, the journey for family caregivers. So we gather all the resources and content, and we really kind of personalize that journey so they're not alone in it. And so the IANA of Ianacare stands for I am not alone. And so I'll just end with, you know, throughout all these ventures, even though I've kind of experienced a lot of different kind of formats of business and work, the most important thing that God has been teaching me throughout this is the center of love. That, you know, no matter what we do or, you know, who we are, what position we have, we all as believers share the greatest commandments, which is to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor. And, you know, our calling is not tied to a certain product or industry, because all those things are going to be at phases and different stages of our life. And our calling is really, how do we utilize everything that we're given and who we are and all of our brokenness to love people. And so if we are put in the position of leadership, however big or small our team is, I feel like everyone has someone that they're influencing. You know, love has to be the center. It should be the reason why we feel compelled to take that leadership position. And it should be the ultimate impact that we want our leadership to have, is to make people feel, you know, that God's agape love. So,
Jessica, thank you so much. Of course, I've heard your story, and you know, it's a gift. Every time I hear it, it's a gift of inspiration, and I'm excited that others are getting to participate in this gift that God blessed you with. You know, speaking of love, I'd love for you to, you know, speak on our current climate. I dare not proceed with just a normal interview without having you share your perspective and your thoughts around what's happening in our climate today. You know, I like, you know, perfect love casts out all fear. There's a lot of fear and anxiety and pain and everything in our country right now. And so I'd love for you to speak to the power of love and how, you know, we believe it can manifest to really outdo all that's going on in our country right now.
Totally. I mean, like so many of us right now, I am just so heartbroken first and foremost. And I think through the influence of Praxis and just like my other faith believing leaders, and I have been really focusing on that word lament, right? And someone asked, like, what's the difference between lament and just being sad? And, you know, I'm someone that tends to take action. So I'm like, what can we do about it? What can we do about it? And what I'm realizing is what we need to do in order to show our love is just to sit, lament, be sad, mourn with our brothers and sisters. And that is the most important step that we have to do. And so, you know, I'm deeply saddened by all the pain that's happening in our world right now. I am deeply angry by the systemic racism and injustice that's in our world. I'm humbly learning and eagerly yearning to hear and listen and, you know, question all of my things as much as I feel like, you know, I believe in, you know, wanting to put justice in our world. Like, I'm still learning. We're learning and learning. So lament and learning. And, but I, at the same time, feel that, this is a very moment in history where our entire world, and I think social media, and as good and bad it is kind of showing that the whole world is going through this right now. So this is a special, unique moment in history where I feel like it can be a turning point. It can't be the only turning point. We've been here before, but it can be a turning point to kind of progress us, moving us forward. And, the power of people's voices is so evident. A single voice has such power right now. And so it's changing me. It's changing me as a leader. It's changing me as a mom. It's changing me as a friend. It's changing me as a believer. And, how it's really impacting me on a day-to-day level is, with both Black Lives Matter and COVID and all the impact that we have not even begun to see yet of all of that. I was just talking to my kids and trying to explain the difference between individual racism and systemic racism and discrimination. And, as I was like talking to them about it, it made me realize that it's not enough to understand what our individual values are, especially as leaders. It's not enough to say, well, I believe this and I'm going to act this way. And so I'm going to influence the small circle that I have. That as leaders, as leaders in whatever sense, as entrepreneurs, leaders, business owners, whatever work that you're doing, we are creating systems.
Yes.
I think that part of it really, more than any other time in my life, has really struck me that it goes beyond my own individual actions and it is a system. Like I'm either contributing to this system and this problem, or I can create systems that actually help create a solution to combat it. Mm. But my role is it's a systematic, like it has a direct impact to the systems that we're creating. And that was huge. So for a very clear example that's challenging me right now is, I've always believed this, but then with all of this, I said, wait a second, we're growing our team, we're hiring. And I don't think in the last 2 interviews, I have actually outwardly either explicitly said my views on diversity and all of this, or asked them about it. And so we said, wait a second, like if we're creating a group to make this impact in the world, like how do we make the root of the system that we're creating that's going to impact other systems reflect what we really believe? And so we need to put it as a core value, because then that's a natural way to kind of bring it up in every single interview with partners, with team members, like, say, this is our value. They can't question what my value is, but it's my way of explicitly saying where we stand on this and how do we incorporate this. And then I think, another way that it really has changed my leadership or just me as a person is just first actively and earnestly listening and learning before doing anything else. So again, I tend to be someone that just wants to say my opinion, share my opinion, or, act and say, how can we fix this? But no, we need to just sit and listen and learn. And then how do I incorporate that into the systems I influence? So always listening to our coworkers, our team members, our partners, starting each meeting, even if it feels like unproductive, we first still listen. And then, bringing in, we serve family caregivers. So it's so easy to turn people that you serve into stats, right? Like reports and stats, but nothing is more powerful than a single person's story. And so bringing that into our weekly culture and operations, so I mean, all of it, and I probably speak for so many that it impacts me on a daily basis.
You just triggered something that I had no intention of sharing, but I'm going to kind of lean into power a little bit here. But back to your point on systems, I remember being in 5th grade, I attended a predominantly Black inner city school in Memphis, Tennessee. Even reflecting back, we had no central heating and air unit. We literally had one oscillating fan in the classroom, and we would get out of school early. Cherokee Elementary, in the heart of one of the most gang-infested, crime-infested communities in Memphis. We call it the Orange Mound community. And so, but in 6th grade, my stepfather got a slight promotion that allowed us to still stay in the city, but we moved just outside of the outskirts of the suburbs. And because they had not yet rezoned school districts, I got bused to a suburban school, Jessica. And I immediately went into remediated mathematics. So they had an A group, B group, and C group, and they put me in the C group. And I was a straight A student prior, but all of a sudden, and I remember this like yesterday, right? My spirit just, I responded to their level of expectation. And so my grades dropped overnight. I almost made my first F. I made 2 Ds, 2 Cs, and 2 Bs on my first report card. I had never even made a C before in my life, but I responded to the level of remediation. It wasn't until 7th grade going into 8th grade, I took a standardized test and I scored in the top 1% in the country. They literally sent a letter home to my mom stating that they had made a mistake and they put me in honors classes. And do you know that overnight I became a straight A student? My confidence went through the roof. And if I'm being totally transparent here, Miss Marlene Williams, I tell the story of how she became the first white person I ever trusted, because Marlene Williams, who was my 8th grade English teacher at Germantown Middle School, she pulled me aside, Jessica, and said, I'm going to support you for the rest of your journey at this school. And she was the one who helped me get a transfer to my high school, et cetera. So to your point, she used her position of power and her position of authority to spot a kid who had been relegated to remediation, but she used that position of power and authority to bring me along for the journey. And because she took a vested interest in me, my story turned out totally different than it would have had I remained remediated as a student. And so I really appreciate that. And even as I think about those we serve at the WorkFaith Connection, who are coming out of conditions of, imprisonment, felonies, crime, et cetera, many of the people we serve, I like to say to people, Jessica, that most of us in culture, we just look at the fruit, but we don't actually go back to the root. So where did that journey begin? I know people who will tell you they've never seen a college graduate in person. True. Like, so if you've only seen a gangbanger or a drug dealer, if that's all you know, you're destined to become that. No different than my son and daughter. It's not even a second thought that they're going to go to college. Like, for them, the idea of doing anything other than going to college is like ridiculous, because they're going to be what they see. And so I appreciated your perspective on systemic challenges that our country is facing, and how those of us who are in positions of power and authority, we should carry the mantle of bringing others along with us and impacting systems. Not just, I loved when you said, not just our individual values, but how do we utilize those individual values to actually move systems along? So any other thoughts around that?
No, I love that you say, and I think from your story, what it is something that really sticks out is that one person, that educator, that teacher, she made a huge difference. I'm sure after seeing that, it probably made a difference on how the school operated, that maybe when they come in, they're not just going to automatically put them in a certain class, right? And so I think, the hope that I have with everything going on in this world is that, I always say it's like one single person and one voice can really ignite change. And it sometimes feels idealistic to say that, but we have to believe it. We have to believe it, because otherwise everything happening is just, you feel so helpless. And so I feel like we need to wrap our mind around, what can we do? How can we use our voice? And you don't have to be the president. You don't have to be the leader. Like, any person, any role, we can all be a leader in our sphere. And I think that's what that person did for you. And I love that.
Jessica, and I know right now what's hot in our country is, the George Floyd story, the Ahmaud Arbery story, Breonna's story. And so obviously there's a lot of talk and energy around, Black lives right now. I want you to speak to being an Asian female. And let's talk diversity and inclusion a little bit.
Sure.
Obviously, again, the temperature right now is around Black lives, but let's talk about women. Let's talk about people of color in general. Maybe share, 1 or 2 stories or pain points, briefly from your experience, because, of course, I know you, so I know you've had some challenges raising capital, you know, as a female. So maybe you could share a little bit for our audience about, you know, as we're talking about power, as we're talking about systems.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some thoughts from you around that.
Oh, so many thoughts, and honestly, thoughts that I'm really newly processing too. But I think, you know, I guess, well, I'll like with being an Asian female entrepreneur, let's just state some of the things that are hard, you know, especially, you know, you mentioned fundraising. Well, one, you know, we always say, and I always say, fundraising and business building and leadership is so much about relationships and networks, right? It just makes a huge difference. But as an Asian female with parents that immigrated here, I didn't have that in front of me. Nothing was passed down. I had to create that all for myself. I had to work harder to kind of put myself in front of people and create relationships and build that credibility quickly, because I didn't have that certain base that was given to me. I think another dynamic is, you know, there's definitely a power dynamic, absolutely, especially when you're asking for money. And the majority of people who are there to give money are white males. I'm starting to see that change, but the stats are still obviously where we have a lot of work to do. And so there's already a power dynamic within the entrepreneur relationship and the investor relationship that exists no matter what, but then you add on top of that I'm Asian, I'm female, I get a lot of comments. I remember pitching, you know, you put yourself out there, you pitch to a whole group of, you know, hundreds of investors, and you're there and you're working hard every single day. And I remember I got off stage and someone pulled me aside. And it was actually someone who is, you know, a believer, so it hurt even more. But then said to me, hey, you know, you've been on my heart. And I said, okay, you know, I'm just like off this high of pitching how we're going to change this world with the venture that I'm creating. He's like, I've been praying and I've been convicted that you should actually stay home for the next 10 years. The kids are young. I think this is the most important thing you could do. And so you should stay home. And it struck me so much, because finally I was in this environment where I felt like this, you know, I was part of this community where I was pitching, and for him to say that there's so many assumptions and, you know, his beliefs that were in there, to say he felt convicted and God was telling him that I should stay home for the next 10 years. I was like, whoa, it really blew my mind and hurt me and made me question. So just as I was saying, and we were talking about how someone can really open up your world, one person can also really make someone question their world. So our words make such an impact, our leadership, and he was, you know, someone that people respected. And so, you know, there's a redemption story in that where, you know, and you know, a couple of years later, you know, I just kind of did my thing, and then I saw him again, and he said, oh my gosh, you must think I'm such a bad person. I was like, oh, it's okay, but he's definitely been on my mind for a long time. And he said, I apologize. You know, I brought my own thoughts into your world and kind of told you what you should do, and I realized I was wrong. And I took that apology, and I was grateful for it. But it just shows like how much, you know, is just rooted in, you know, our upbringing, these thoughts that can hold people back. And so, but this is the thing. I think one thing that one pivotal story that I realized. So again, I'm always like, okay, how do we overcome this? Like, you know, and what my psychiatrist dad always taught me was there are a lot of things in this world that you can't control. You're born into a certain way, everything. But what we can always control is how we respond. We can control how we respond. We can't always control the outcome, but we can control how we respond. And so there's this one pivotal moment where I was fundraising and I ended up getting unexpectedly pregnant. I mean, I know how it works, but it wasn't planned. And so here I am, less than 4% of all venture capital funding go to women, let alone Asian women, let alone pregnant women. I don't even know if they have a statistic for that. And so I started fundraising and things were going well. The business was going well. But I started, you know, getting bigger and bigger after each meeting. And, you know, I was insecure myself because I was like, how am I going to do this? This is not what I planned. You know, how are people going to take me? Are they going to take me seriously? All of that. And so, I started like in the meetings showing that insecurity. And I started saying, oh my gosh, don't worry, I'm going to work so hard. I've done this before, all of that. And people started, like the meetings, I got a lot of no's. Some even outright question of like, how are you going to handle this? And so I got so fed up because if we didn't raise this next round of funding, we were just at that early stage of business where we just wouldn't be able to move forward. And so it was life or death for our venture. And so I finally went into New York to this meeting, 2 men, and I was like fed up. And so I started pitching. I was about 6 months pregnant. So you can, kind of see, but you never ask. And, in the midst of my pitch, I just said, oh yeah. And then, I'm pregnant. And so they said, oh, congratulations. Is this your first baby? And I was like, oh no, this is not my first baby. This is baby number 6. I have 6 kids now. I'm totally in this baby world. So anyways, as I'm talking about the financial projections here and our customer acquisition costs there, and I just kept right into pitching the financial part of it, the whole time their face was like, oh my gosh, this girl's crazy. Like, oh my gosh, how can she be like pitching to us? She's going to have her 6th baby. Like what? How can she do this? And then I looked back at their faces and I was like, oh, and by the way, I'm just kidding. It's not baby number 6. It's just baby number 3. You feel better, right? And they're like, holy crap, I feel better. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And they were like laughing. They high-fived me. And they were the first check into my $4 million round. And what I learned from that was not that you joke about these serious things or whatever, but I learned that until I embraced my situation and said, you know what? I don't care what you think. This is my life. I believe in myself, and they will see your confidence in your own self. And that's what they're investing in. They're investing in the belief that you have in yourself. Mm. And so when I think about all these ways that we don't fit the mold, we may not fit the mold in whatever community or work that we do, and we all have something that we're insecure about. But until we kind of embrace it and face it and be honest with it, and we can't expect anyone else to do that before we do that. And that is the show.
Wow, thank you. And it's funny because that ties directly into the mission of WorkFaith. Mm-hmm. What we're doing, what you just shared, that's the gift that we're trying to give to those we serve on a daily basis. Many people, mm-hmm. similar to my story, have been relegated to certain labels, and they live up to those expectations and those labels. And we know that as we embrace them in our organization and in our mission, we know that there's an opportunity to actually edify them, to build them up, to help them, tell a different narrative about who they are. And that's what we're up to in our mission on a daily basis. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because we see the people coming through our doors who just need that second chance. But more importantly, to your point, they need that belief in themselves. And so, so I'm proud to say, man, that as WorkFaith, that's our intent. Exactly what you said is that whatever level people are on, you were at a level where you were raising you were on a $4 million round. I'm not sure if that was your Series A or B, or where were you?
Series A. Yeah.
Your Series A. But you even what's powerful is that even at that level, like regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, socioeconomically, you were experiencing some of the same pain that maybe someone who, frankly, who is coming through our program, a graduate who we're trying to get, to $15, $20 an hour. And we're trying to support them with belief in themselves and building them up and edifying them. And so I just thank you for sharing your perspective on that power dynamic that exists in our world, and how it's incumbent upon us. I can't say enough. For those of us who are here, who are listening in today, it's incumbent upon us to bring people along with us and help to instill that confidence in them. And to your point, if we're in positions of power and authority, we also want to be the ones to remove the systemic challenges so that people can come through the door and actually have equality and an equal opportunity to become who we believe God has called them to become. Man, we could go on forever. I'm looking at the time. I just realized, wow.
Oh my gosh.
No, this is fantastic. So I'm going to actually open up for maybe 2 or 3 questions if we have the time to do so. I'm pulling down our let's see, is anyone, please, you all submit questions. I'm reading through.
Can I just say mine, because I may not.
Okay, go for it, please.
Okay, Jessica, wow, thank you. I love your last name. My name is Kim.
Oh, hi, Kim.
But So just listening at you, I'm inspired by so much that you've said, but one thing that's interesting is how you have somehow uh, found a way to turn your compassion into commerce. And it's, I think for a person like me, literally that was born into a ministry family and worked in ministry my whole life, you're so used to giving everything away and almost feel guilty when you would even think about putting a dollar figure on something, a dollar value. And in listening to you, it's opening up my mind to, in a way, to see how you can impact yet even greater from a more meaningful standpoint, because it's all in where it's birthed from. So just speak a little bit to that.
Oh, I love that question, Kim, and it's so great meeting you. Great question. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I strongly believe it's like if we center ourselves on serving the people that we're serving through love, and then you have to figure out what's the best way to do that. And I feel like one thing that I want to break all the time is people think that if you're making money, that it's just selfish, right? So let me just talk about like when it's ministry or nonprofit, or if it's for-profit, and I've always just done for-profit. The way I see the difference is how are you serving and loving the people that that are benefiting from what you're creating? And if there is a way and a value that is that people can pay for, and there's like commerce there, that's actually really effective because it makes it sustainable. So something that struck me was that a lot of times if there's no sustainable revenue coming in, then I have to spend like 80% of my time fundraising. I need some income to bring in to fund the work that I'm doing, right? So either way, there's no right or wrong, but it's more about asking like, how can I sustainably do this work? And if there is an opportunity where, so for example, like if there's an opportunity in what you're doing, there's a market, there's a value, it's actually serving and loving your people more if you take advantage of that for-profit operations in order to sustainably keep serving them without having to distract yourself to kind of always get income another way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So I see it as, it's not like just because you're putting money in your pocket, it's part of the operations to serve. I think that
makes total sense. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Anthony, this is Bernie Patel here. So so Jessica, Bernie Patel, I'm on staff here with Anthony. Thank you so much. I was really struck by what you said, and Anthony, thanks for opening up the floor to our current environment, with racial challenge and so forth. I was really struck with kind of the angle in which you're approaching this, Jessica, in that you're saying that in order for us to have meaningful change, we as leaders or influencers can be partakers in systematic change that would be long-term and meaningful. And it really reminded me of Brennan Manning, who was a Jesuit monk in New Orleans. He kind of had a similar thought. He said, in every human encounter, you're either giving life or draining it. And it actually inspired Toby Mac's song about 10 years ago, Speak Life. But my question is this, Jessica, such a beautiful thought. How do we go about taking, at least some small steps towards that systematic, building that systematic, meaningful, lasting change? Because as you said, we've been here societally before.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I feel like it's first to be aware of what the systems are. I think everyone with this, everything happening, I think everyone, and I see it in my friends, in my community, even myself, thinking about the systems that exist in a different light, like really learning the root, like the root of policing, right? The root of our education system, the root of everything. Like, what are the systems? I feel like innovation and change really comes from knowledge. Sometimes we think innovation is always new. It's actually no, you cannot create new until you know what exists. So looking, and this is actually how we created Ianacare. We spent 8 months looking at the history of palliative care, healthcare. Why is it equal or not equal? Like why? Like what were the roots of these systems? And I think the first step we can take is understanding that fully And then if you root yourself in love, understanding the root, then the ideas and the inspiration of how you can move that forward will naturally come in whatever space that you're in. So yeah, I think it's, you know, it's learning. It's learning the history.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Do we have another question or two?
Yes. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for sharing your story. So inspirational. I'm Latonia with WorkFaith. So my question is, if you are a part of a system with leadership who doesn't necessarily have perspective that you think would cause a needed change, maybe they are just, you know, they're on the other side, and you are under that leadership, what can you do as someone under that to inspire change? Or does that mean you need to get out of that system?
Yeah. I love that question. I feel like the most powerful thing that we can do, especially if you're an existing system and you're not necessarily maybe the even key decision maker, is the power of relationships with anybody that you have, and kind of leveraging that to just share. So one, I think we are all called to excellence. I know Anthony believes in this too, right? Whatever work we do, however small the job is or the task is, we have to do it with such excellence. Because with excellence, and God calls us to excellence, right? Especially if we say we are a child of God, He is excellent. So we need to reflect that, right? So doing our job with excellence builds a credibility and relationships with people who may have the opportunity to open the floor and platform to the community or organization or system that you're part of. And if you take that and ask for an opportunity to just share. And I think something that's like where they will be open, so maybe it's at a part of a meeting or maybe it's individual meetings, but you can just have this opportunity to share. Then you see how they respond. I think there's a point where sometimes all your efforts are really not heard at all. And you are putting yourself in a situation where you're hurting yourself in that. And it feels like you're banging your head against the wall. You've tried, and you're doing it with a level of excellence. You're building relationships, but the opportunities just don't come where they open it up to you or they shut you down. Then I think there are points where it is okay, and you're not a failure for saying this isn't the environment for me to flourish. And so it really, it's hard to say that in general terms because I feel like it's all about the nuances and the personal situation and who the person is. And so I would love to have a separate conversation with you, but I think in general, it's, take whatever opportunity based on the credibility that you've built to share your story and your thoughts with earnest, and, people will listen to you then, or at least you'll have an opportunity to do so.
Jessica, I had a quick question sent to me on how you went about sharing your faith or not in many of your pitches. Were you in environments where you could share your faith?
Yeah. I have always been sharing my faith through my story. So I think what we all have and what people can't take away from you, no matter how conservative or liberal or like whatever environment you're in, is your story. And so the way that I've done it has incorporated my faith and in my work and the reason why within the story that I share. Because, when I talk about my mom or when I talk about what I think the world needs, when I share it within the context of my story, it doesn't matter what they believe on the other side because they can't take that away from me. So I feel like that's at least the first open door. And so I think a challenge for us is how do we incorporate our faith within the story, even when we talk about how we got to where we are professionally or how we think about certain things. And you can do it in a way where it's reflecting just what your genuine story is versus preaching to them.
Beautiful. Do we have one more question? We have time maybe for one more question. Anyone?
I can elaborate on my question if you
don't. Please.
Kind of, I think building off of, I feel like my question might pigeonhole you, and that's not my intention. Just we talked about, how can we be a part of creating systems? And I was thinking, you talked about I always think about when I'm working for an employer, how can I bring my faith to my job without looking like that disciple, that crazy person that everybody thinks that's my only goal, except helping the company with their core mission. I just wondered if when you were seeking funding, if that was something that you were thinking about. For instance, I'm in the education technology software, and I've represented companies or I've sold into state software that were maybe using curriculum that did not represent the history of African Americans appropriately. That story that wasn't true, and telling that true, deep story from 400 years ago. Yeah. So I would tell the company I was working for, I don't want to be in that state anymore. I don't believe in that concept. So I had that luxury of being able to do that. Sure. But you were seeking funds. I'm just wondering if that, it's so hard to get funding, and I know that, but were you cognizant of the systems at the companies you were seeking money from, or are you limited?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way I see it, that's a great question. It's a real dynamic, and it's a constant tension for sure. And so I don't want to come off saying like, anytime I just preach and say what I believe, because especially when you're reliant on that funding, you tend to say, okay, I want to make sure that I'm positioned in a well where they say, oh yeah, you're someone that I would want to fund, or that initiative. But when I think about funding, it's a long-term relationship. At some point, they're going to know how I operate. They're going to know me and what I believe, and it's going to come out because it comes out every day. And there are pretty strong convictions of which I'm going to make decisions on, big strategic ones, small everyday ones. And so when I really came to understand this, it was really after, my second business where I realized I will sacrifice I actually don't want to get matched with a funding source that is against what I truly believe, because that will not be a good relationship. That will cause more tension later. So yes, I might get that check from them today, but in 6 months, there are going to be issues. And so I don't want that. And so I find that, and I want to empower anyone that's like asking for money, funding, or strong to leadership. There's a point where you know how you're going to operate, and you have to authentically share that in whatever way, because especially for long-term relationships, because it's going to come out, and you'd rather get the no now than have issues later. And so I think that empowers me to share more. And so of course I go in, and whenever I'm talking to anyone or pitching to anybody or selling or whatever it is, I always try to understand where the other person's perspective is, and I'll be respectful of that, but that's very different than me holding back or not saying, or saying something that I don't believe just to get that partnership or that funding from that person, because it's bad news later.
Thank you for addressing it.
Well, thank you all so much. Wow, Jessica, what an honor. As always, Jessica and I shared many stages together. Yes. And so we could go on and on. So thank you for being a great friend, and for the many times we've shared, and I know we'll have more time together in the future. And thank you all so much for signing on with us. I wanted to update you, Jessica. We're actually having Andy Crouch on next month. For those of you who are not aware, tell everybody, Andy and Jessica and I are in a similar circle. Andy used to be the chief editor for Christianity Today. He now also serves in a role where he continues to write content, develop content around theology and culture. But he has a great book called Strong and Weak. And we're going to have a conversation about power. Once again, it directly ties into the work we do as an organization. And so Andy is going to talk about those of us who are in positions of leadership, who are in positions of authority, who have an opportunity to, as we talked about, tear down the walls of systemic racism and make the dreams of others possible, like those we serve on a daily basis, whose society has maybe counted out, whose society has written off. Those of us in positions of power have an opportunity to actually be a voice for them, and to be in positions where we can create systems that redeem, not tear down, not that create blockades for people like us. And so we're grateful that hopefully you all will join us next month. You're going to see more emails coming out regarding that session with Andy. He's written 4 books, internationally renowned, and I can't wait to bring him on so we can have this conversation as well and continue to serve those we serve on a daily basis. It is our mission to really help those who are in transition, who are looking for redemption in their lives, who are looking for God to do, in many cases, even miraculous things, you all. And so we get up every day and we want to use our privilege. We want to use our position of authority to uplift others, to edify others, to serve those who need support systems to help them overcome the obstacles that they face on a daily basis. And so, Jessica, thank you for your heart toward a similar mission. You're doing it through Ianacare. We're doing it through WorkFaith. And so we're honored that you joined us for this platform today. Thank you all so much. We look forward to staying in touch. Listen, follow us on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Please follow our social media, you all. We have so many more great things coming up for you. We actually have a hiring event coming up in August, so stay on the lookout for that. We have over 32 employer partners and community serving organizations and churches that have already agreed to be a part of this experience. And our goal is to try to get 1,000 people in a single space together in a day to have them at least interviewed, hopefully even employed, before they actually leave that experience. And so please, please, please join forces with us. We need you to be a part of our network. For those who who want to experience or who need to experience what we do, invite them to be a part of this experience. And we look forward to staying in touch in the near future. God bless you all. We love you all. And thank you for committing your hour with us today.